So TJ, the amazing atheist, has made a video titled The End of Rape, which I think you should all watch. Links in the description down below. And I wanted to draw attention to his video because I thought it was rather informative. He makes a pretty sound argument, I think, for why rape is prevalent and not taken as seriously in some social situations compared to others. I believe he still stands by his stance that he does not accept that there is a rape culture per se. It's just that certain social situations and within certain contexts, rape may not be taken as seriously. TJ's argument is pretty much something that goes along the lines of this. When people are subjected to a radical change in their environment where they are forced to adapt, usually by changing their own moral code and their own system of beliefs, when that change has a profound effect on their capacity for empathy, that's when violent crime tends to increase. And rape, being a subset of violent crime, tends to increase as a result. TJ uses three examples to support his thesis. He uses rapes that occur within the military, rapes that occur within prison, and rapes that usually include the athlete of sorts, usually like a football star or something. And I think he and most other people would think of Marville and Steubenville as the main examples for that particular situation. Now, in all three of those, you could most certainly argue that you have to change your moral outlook very drastically if you want to swim rather than sink. But I think there are other things that these three situations and many other rape situations have in common, which I think contributes to why rape is not taken as seriously in those particular situations. Number one, which I think is my strongest point, is that the victims in many rape cases generally tend to have a lower social standing than the rapist, or a lower social standing than the rest of society in general. In Steubenville and Marville, the men in those stories were considered popular, where they were well known in those respective towns. I believe one of them had a father that was a politician. Like, these people had power in society, at least a lot more power than their victims. In the military, it would often be the commanding officer which has the most power. And that's not, of course, to say that all rapes in the military happen as a result of the commanding officer abusing their power. But, there's a clear hierarchy of power and of responsibility within the military. And with that hierarchy can come a lot of situations where people will abuse that power. Prison, believe it or not, also has a hierarchy. Not as well known, but in prison, certain prisoners have more power than others. Some have more influence due to the nature of the crime they were incarcerated for, like drug lords and mob bosses tend to have a lot more power than people who are convicted of child molestation or rape. They tend to be at the very bottom of the hierarchy. And of course, those people tend to get abused more often. The second thing is pretty obvious, I think, and most of you will recognize that all three of these situations have a certain code of silence where you do not report the rapist, which this sort of silence is not either present or not as prevalent in other areas of society. And yes, you could argue that we as a society do not condone rape as a whole, and I would have to agree with you, but in a lot of situations in society, there is a very big code of silence, where you do not tell on your brothers and sisters. It's dishonorable if you do. If you report, let's just say, your fellow officers in the military to the higher ups, you are treated like a rat. You are treated like a snitch, and there is nothing good that can come from that. Finally, and I say I'm finishing with my weakest point here, I'd have to argue that in all of these situations, not only do we know that these people have more power than the victims in these situations, but it's also because society gives them this sense of power and this sense of glorification for having that power. So what exactly do I mean? Well, let's take a look at Steubenville and Maryville, for example. I believe all of the men in those incidents were football athletes, pretty much local stars. And yes, they should be recognized for their talent in football. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but essentially the towns, those respective towns, gave them so much credence and so much prestige for being a football star that they couldn't possibly imagine that they would do horrible things like rape a girl. Think of in the military, you don't imagine that your commanding officer is going to force you to bend over and suck his dick. When you think of the military, you think respect, you think discipline, you think someone of like a father figure. And we in society have so much media and literature to glorify being a higher up in the military that we can never imagine someone who would abuse their power like that. And yet we know it happens, and it happens more frequently than we think. So who's to blame for this? Well, feminists would presumably say it is a result of the patriarchy. Men tend to be in positions of power. They're the ones abusing the power. Therefore, women are oppressed. We have to give women their power back and freedom for women. And to be honest, I think this is an extremely oversimplistic view on the issue at hand. And if that's what you've concluded after watching this far into my video, I think you've missed my point. And again, the best evidence I have against this whole idea of the patriarchy just controlling everything is the prevalence of prison rape and how much more likely you are to get raped in prison than you are to be outside prison. And we know this is a problem. As society, we have parodied this so many times in media, in movies, and just everywhere. We know it's a problem. We just don't take it seriously. I think the real problem, the real issue behind why rape is so prevalent in these situations is something that we've always known, something that has always been a problem in society, and that is that the rich, the wealthy, the privileged, the ones with the most power tend to oppress the people who have the least amount of power. It seems so obvious, but apparently we seem to forget about this. There are plenty of social situations where men, for the most part, have more power than women. There are plenty of social situations where women have more power than men. A lot of the time, that power is abused. A lot of the time, it is underreported. And you know what? This is not a woman's issue. This is not solely a man's issue. This is a human rights issue. We all have to be concerned about it because it affects us all. And I think that painting rape as solely a woman's issue, that solely is an issue within the domain of feminism, that in and of itself is degrading towards male rape victims. It is insulting to the intelligence of men, good men, who would not for the life of them harass or rape a woman in any way. And in general, it is inefficient in dealing with the broader scope of the situation at hand, which is an abuse of power by people who shouldn't have power. That's my opinion. I would like to know what you all think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Feel free to leave a comment or a video response. They're always open. Oh wait, we don't have video responses anymore. And apparently, my comment section is fucked up. Thanks a lot, YouTube, and fuck you. May the truth always be heard.